Hey, well, welcome again to this month's Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrological Conditions. Welcome to June. I can't believe it's June 1 already, but summer's here. And this webinar series is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center at Western Kentucky University in partnership with National Integrated Drought Information System, known as NIDIS, and in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. Production and delivery of this webinar reflects the contributions of many partners committed to serving the needs of the Commonwealth of Kentucky and its people. The next regularly scheduled webinar is the first Thursday of each month, which next month will be July 6th, and at a normal time of 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central Time. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing. The webinar is also live streaming on the Kentucky Climate Center YouTube channel. And a webinar archive is available on the Kentucky Climate Center YouTube channel. And you see below there a photo of Wayne County from one of our measurement stations there. That's just from a few days ago. Beautiful spring photo. And we have several from this month. So as normal, we'll take a look at recent conditions across the state over the past month, and we'll look at the impacts of those conditions, and then we'll look ahead both in the short term and then long term through the summer. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A at the end. And again, a few more photos there on the left. The upper left is from Lewis County, from a measurement station there. That was the beginning of the month. You see some nice fog off in the distance. And in the lower left is just from yesterday here in Warren County. We had some pop-up thunder showers around. Beautiful, beautiful skies. So let's jump right in here. Look back at May temperatures. Overall, the numbers say we were 0.1 degrees above normal. But of course, it depended on where you were. If you were in climate divisions 1 or 2, which is the far west or southern tiers, you were 0.7 to 0.8 degrees above normal. But if you were in the bluegrass or eastern portions of the state, then you were probably pretty cool, 0.6 to 0.7 degrees below normal, or even more, depending on where you were in those regions. If you look at the upper right, it's the average max temperatures across the state. Again, if you were in the west or south, you were near normal to average to slightly above average. But if you were, again, in the bluegrass or east, you were below average. And really the same for the average lows. Not a whole lot of difference there between the highs and lows across the state. Now, if we look at the spring months, March, April, May, we found that we averaged about a ½ degree above normal for the spring, which actually put us at the 34th warmest spring. Even though we were near normal, the way the averages are, they're actually not all that many. A few years were extremely warm. And so it kind of biases. We don't have that many years actually above normal. But we were a ½ degree above normal. And when you look at the average highs in the upper right, you see that we were, most of the state was ½ degree to a degree above, a few patches slightly above. But you look at the lows, and we were average to slightly cool. So you see, we had a lot of clear skies, drier weather, so we had a larger diurnal range than we typically see. And again, that's a consequence of the drier, sunnier weather that we've had through the spring. So far this year, if you include January and February, we're actually 3.6 degrees above average. But January and February were among the warmest ever. So that puts us the year so far as the 3rd warmest in Kentucky history, again, largely because of those first 2 months of the year. That puts us third behind 2012, which was 4.8 degrees above, and 2017, which was 4.2 degrees above. If we continue to see near normal temperatures, we should see us drop, maybe staying in the top 10 for a while, but we should continue to drop in the rankings. So moving to precipitation, it's been a dry period, as everyone knows. This is a map showing the precip estimates from the last week, and you see western third of Kentucky has had 0 or almost 0. The middle third, pretty low amounts, and fortunately the eastern third, which needed it the most, did see some welcome rains, although largely far less than an inch. If we look at the last 2 weeks, again, this is spring, so we should be seeing above an inch per week. And we don't see any 2-inch readings here except in Pike County and far eastern Kentucky. Again, far below what we should be seeing for this time of year. When we look at the last 30 days, again, we want to see an inch and a quarter per week. So with this 30-day estimate, we should be seeing ranges of 4 to 5 inches or more. And except for a small swath there in western Kentucky, we're not seeing much above 4 inches or 5 inches across the state. So again, a very dry spring so far. When we look at the 60-day, again, far below normal. We do see this line in western Kentucky that had pretty substantial rainfall from one system that came through, but otherwise pretty dry across the state. And that's kind of the theme for today, except for a few patches here and there. The state's been drying out now for some time. And when we look at the 90-day, we see, again, kind of the same. Again, we should be seeing about an inch per week. So we should be seeing estimates well over 10 inches. And we're not seeing that, except in a few limited areas. So to kind of summarize, the Kentucky average is for May was 3.5 inches for the month, which puts us at nearly an inch and a half below normal, which is 70% of what we should be seeing. And that puts May as the 90th wettest May on record out of the 129 years. So we're definitely in that bottom third or bottom quarter of the 130 years that we have on record. If you look at the top, again, these are the NOAA estimates, the 30, 60, 90-day outlook estimates. And again, they kind of reflect the precip estimates from radar. Not a whole lot of difference here, but it clearly pulls out that swath in western Kentucky and far eastern Kentucky, and especially dry in the central portion of the state. And we're also drying out in far western Kentucky as well. And you see that in both the 30-day and 60-day, and even 90-day. So not a lot of variability there. So when we look at the spring, again, we averaged close to 12 inches across the state, which puts us at 1.73 inches below normal for the spring, which puts us at the 85th wettest on record out of those 129 years. Now, I will say that Climate Division 1, which is far western, actually averaged a half a degree above, but I think but that was biased because of the swath precip. A lot of the counties, even in the west, are below average. And again, this is a different look at the month and the spring. But again, it shows pretty much the same pattern across the state. This is on the left is the last 30 days, And again, you see that swath just to the west of Bowling Green, north, and then far eastern Kentucky are close to average, or if not slightly above average for the month, but large portions of the state are quite a bit below, or even below 50% of what they should be getting for May. And when we look at the spring, again, not nearly the totals that we need that we expect in the spring, and most areas of the state are somewhere between 50 and 75% of normal. So where does that put us on the drought monitor? Well, you see we are starting to drought, especially in central portions of the state and far western Kentucky. Overall, you kind of see the same pattern with pretty extreme drought over the plain states, although that is improving, as we'll discuss. But you see quite a bit more yellow on the map this month than we've seen recently. And when we look at Kentucky, we do see that reflected from the precip estimates that we've seen, starting to dry out, especially in central portions of the state, far western Kentucky. And I don't expect this to change in the next several weeks. In fact, we'll probably see it worsen before it gets better. Now, this is something I wanted to show. So last fall, of course, we had drought, especially over western portions of the state. And through the winter period, we saw quite a bit of improvement. And so this map is was generated at the end of February, and it shows the improvement across the country over the winter period. And you see quite a bit of green over both the west and as well as Ohio and Tennessee valleys. And so the winter really helped green things up over much of the country. So remember that. And then we go 6 months ahead. And this is the improvement or change, I should say, in the drought monitor between the spring, the beginning of spring, and now. So this is the change over time through the spring period. And you see a large swath of the eastern U.S. Drying out. And fortunately, we continued to see improvement over the plains and far western U.S., which is good news for them because they're largely reliant on that for their water and agriculture. But we do have a large portion of the country drying out as well, and that has impacts. So diving into this a little bit more, from the GRACE, the NASA estimates, we see the areas of the plains still, of course, very dry, and we see portions of the Northeast and even portions of the upper Midwest starting to dry out. And the calculated soil moisture ranking percentile kind of shows that as well, drying across the Midwest, the northern plains, and now we're starting to see some across the mid-Atlantic and into Kentucky. Some of the stream flows also are starting to reflect this. We see some lower than average stream flow across central Kentucky, especially southern Kentucky, reflecting in some of these stream flows. And we see that even in the 28-day average as well. Several streams here are starting to reflect that drying. And one thing that we've seen with a lot of sunny days this spring period is pretty high evaporative demand across mostly across the upper Midwest. When we look at the 1 month and 3 months, we see that there was a mistake in how this was calculated. So some of this in the northern area of the country is a mistake, but closer to home, it's more correct, and we do see some of that evaporative demand through the spring period, and that's one reason we're seeing the drying soils. When we look at the mesonet obs, these are just a few select sites across the state. Fortunately, at the lower levels, at 20 and 40 inches, we're not seeing a lot of drying yet. This is the soil moisture measurements from the past week, and the 20 and 40 inch estimates are pretty constant, pretty saturated still. Graves County, Lewis County, all four of these counties show very steady soil moisture levels at the deeper depths. But when we get to the more shallow depths, 2, 4, 8 inches, we are seeing this slow drying really at all the sites, or at least most of the sites. And this is just over a week period. So even over the past week, we've seen pretty significant drying, especially as the temperatures are starting to warm, especially in the week ahead. We're going to be seeing quite a bit warmer temperatures than we've seen to date. So I expect these will continue to dry, and we can probably expect to start seeing some of these deeper levels start to dry over the next couple of weeks. You see a little jump in the soil moisture there, 2 inches. Looks like they got a little rainfall there, but that quickly dried after just a few days. Now, switching gears a little bit to the severe weather that we saw over the past month. Pretty typical of May. In some ways, maybe, well, pretty typical. Quite a few thunderstorm events across the southern tier. Quite a few hail events, actually, for us, for Kentucky, kind of scattered across the state. We had 2 tornadoes. There was a tornado in Louisville that's not shown here on this map, and then there was another tornado in eastern Kentucky. There was one fatality associated with the storms in and around Louisville. Here are a few photos from that. There were 6 tornadoes in all, most in Indiana, but 4 of those were rated as EF1s and 2 EF0s. And again, there was that one fatality in the Louisville area. And I believe the tornado in eastern Kentucky was an EF0. But quite a bit of damage from the wind events across the state, but somewhat of a typical May. Now I say typical, but when we look at the statistics, it does look like we're off to a bit of a stormy start for 2023. This is from the Paducah office. This is the number of severe thunderstorm plus tornado warnings that have been issued so far. And so far, 2023 is leading the pack. I just went back and plotted these back to 2013. You could go back further, but we do have a pretty fast start to the year, at least in Western Kentucky. When we look at Louisville, it's not quite as extreme, but we're still near the top of the pack for the last 10, 11 years. And we'll see where we end up, but it looks like we still have a good 2 months left of that we can expect of active weather across the state. And then going to Jackson, we again are kind of near the top there of for this time of year. So we'll see how it pans out going forward. Now switching to Kentucky ag impacts with the dry weather that we have. A beautiful photo here from Butler County earlier in the month. And I'm guessing that's hay and winter wheat. Maybe someone can correct me, but I think that's a little bit of both there in that picture. But beautiful photo there. So this is kind of an interesting photo. This is from last year. I'm trying to move my little there we go. This is a photo from last year, and we actually received almost double the precip last year compared to this year. But crops are far behind, far ahead of where we were last year. So what you see there is a field ready to be planted, or maybe just planted, and here we have this year. So last year and this year. And that's partly a consequence of the nice dry weather we've had during the planting season. And so a lot of the crops are ahead of the 5-year average, and which was great because we've had plenty of days to get out in the field and get the crops planted and started. So this is a summary of some of the crops, and the blue line is this year. The 5-year average is the green line, and so you can see for corn we've been above average pretty much all year so far, remain above average. The Kentucky soybeans, again, quite a bit ahead of schedule compared to the previous, compared to last year and the 5-year average, and the same with tobacco. We're ahead of last year and far ahead of the 5-year average. Now, the bad news is that between the late freeze that we had in some portions of the state and now the drier weather, we are starting to feel some of those effects. When we look at the Kentucky winter wheat condition, we see that compared to last year and compared to the 5-year average, we have a significant portion rated as poor or fair compared to the previous years. And again, that's a reflection of both the dry weather, but also that late freeze that we had. And this is also reflected in this table here. You know, the crop progress is again, for most of these crops, or really all of these, are ahead of last year and ahead of the 5-year average. Corn, soybeans, tobacco, and the winter wheat. So we're doing well in that regard. But the crop conditions, we are seeing, again, some rising numbers there in the percentage rated as fair or poor compared to what it has been. And when we look at, let me go back. So when we look at other states, we're similar, ahead of schedule, but we are starting to dry out. And what you see here is the percent of topsoil moisture rated as short to very short. And this is the latest numbers, and it shows that we are drying out, in addition to the states to our north, drying out quite rapidly, again due to that evaporative demand and the lack of rainfall. And so now we look ahead, and for the next 7 days, wow, big high pressure system over us and to our north, not much improvement at all. Maybe a little over the southern tier, western Kentucky, but not much improvement at all. In fact, not much at all over the Ohio Valley or Tennessee Valley or even deep south. So we move to the 6 to 10 day outlook. And with regards to temperatures, they actually expect us to maybe the next week looks pretty warm, but after that, maybe looks like they're expecting maybe near normal temperatures, or at least maybe below normal even for the eastern half of the state, maybe slightly above for the western portion. But the big news is continued below normal precip, at least for the northern tier, and near normal chances for the rest of us. Now, if we go further, the 8 to 14 day outlook, they are expecting some maybe above normal chances of precip moving back in, and with continued warmer temperatures for most of the state. And if we go further, and this is the June outlook, continued warm, particularly over northern 2/3 of Kentucky, but and that dry weather hangs around, retreats northward a little bit, but still hanging into northern portions of Kentucky. So it looks like June could remain dry, but probably warm. Now let's go further. When we look at the summer, and now this includes June, but also July and August, we see continued above normal temperatures, but a bullseye and precip right over Kentucky, centered over the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. So we'll talk more about this, but the big question is, why do we have that? What's causing that? Is that related to El Nino? Well, we do have what's called an El Nino watch issued by NOAA, National Weather Service, and they're predicting a 90% chance of an El Nino developing. And that's the forecast that you see here. We're in a neutral phase currently, but it looks like we're rapidly moving to an El Nino. And so one question is, especially since we're kind of in the middle of storm season still, what does El Nino do for our storm season? And if you look at most, the El Ninos in the past, generally that leads to fewer tornadoes across much of the country and fewer severe storms, as compared to La Nino, where you have an increased chances for tornadoes, even in Western Kentucky, which we saw, and severe weather. So hopefully that means going forward, beginning next spring, we'll see less severe weather impacting our state, which is good news. But typically El Nino has its greatest impacts during the winter. And so what we have shown here are composites from NOAA. On the left are the impacts from all El Ninos over the last 30 years. And this is the impacts on winter precip measured between November and March. And typically El Ninos lead us to a very dry pattern, particularly over Kentucky. Whereas when we look at La Nina events, it leads to above normal precip for Kentucky, typically, or at least Western Kentucky. So according to this, as we head into an El Nino, we'd expect Kentucky to have drier than normal, at least winter precipitation, November through March. So what does our current outlooks predict? Well, this is, remember our summer forecast was above normal precip. This is the fall forecast, September, October, November, continued above normal precip for us. Now during the winter time, December, January, February, they back off some with equal chances for most of the state. But then in the spring of next year, now this is going way out, but spring of next year and summer of next year, they continue with this bullseye and precipitation over Kentucky. Now other than the models, the model dynamics forecasting this, I'm having trouble pinpointing exactly why they're forecasting this precip for us. I'm not really finding a particular teleconnection that's driving this, but we'll see. We'll see if this holds. The good news is that the summer forecast is showing above normal precip. So the fact that we're heading into drought-like conditions and they're still predicting these above normal precip for July and August is good, but we'll have to see if it pans out. This is the current drought outlook for June. They are forecasting drought conditions to develop at least across the upper Midwest, across Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and into northern Kentucky. We'll see if that develops further south into central Kentucky before the rains return. But right now, NOAA is not predicting that. In fact, they're predicting even the upper Midwest to stay drought free. And again, that's because of that July and August forecast that they're anticipating. They're also expecting drought to improve quite a bit over the Great Plains, which is good news for them. And of course, the fire potential, nothing in our area, nothing across the Ohio Valley or Tennessee valleys at this time. So in summary, after a hot start to 2023, temperatures have moderated some to get us closer to average, but nevertheless, 2023 remains the third warmest year on record. Our spring was warm, about a half degree above average, and dry, 1.73 inches below normal. Kentucky continues to drought with little relief expected during June, but fortunately, impacts on crops have mostly been minimal, with some exceptions there. The summer outlook forecasts mild to warm temperatures to continue, but hopefully a wet summer following a dry June. And of course, NOAA has issued the El Nino watch, and typically El Nino brings dry winter weather to the state, but of course those long-range forecasts show a bullseye of precip over us. So we'll have to wait to see if that pans out. And again, our next regularly scheduled webinar is July 6th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central Time. And feel free to contact myself here at WKU, Matt Dixon at U of K, or Chip Zimmer at the Division of Water, or Bill Caldwell. And we are, feel free to check out our app and story map. And again, this is being recorded and will be made available on the YouTube. So with that, we can stop and take questions. Any questions? Okay, let me display this and we'll get started.
So Jerry, I'll say one thing, and maybe this is for the group. You know, Ben Rudy out in Fulton County, he sent me a message earlier that he's starting to see some drought stress in corn out that way, mainly along the field edges and compaction areas. Is anybody else on the call, or are you seeing any impacts right now to the normally dry conditions that are starting to set in across the state? We take this info and we'll relay it to Chip Zimmer, and it's very useful in showing what or updating the U.S. Drought Monitor, I should say, for the state of Kentucky.
This is Keenan in Franklin County. We're not really seeing much yet. Hay seems to be kind of short. The main thing that I've noticed is ponds that aren't spring fed, or maybe some that are, I don't know. They're down a foot and a half in most parts of Franklin County.
Gotcha. Appreciate the info, Ken.
Yeah, this is Kevin Jeffries from Oldham County. Kind of same thing that Franklin County seeing. Our hay, crop is really short. First cutting, just not a lot of growth there, and so I don't know whether that's going to improve. Hopefully, but it's going to looks like it's going to be a short, short hay crop at least early.
Thank you. Yeah, I was telling Jerry earlier, my big concern moving forward is this forecast. It doesn't look great right now. So the 8 to 14 day outlook shows maybe some signs of above normal rainfall, but I'm not taking that to the bank right now. And this dry week ahead, it's not promising. So
Yeah, I've seen a lot of variability and a lot of volatility in those month forecasts. I'm not sure well, we're in a neutral phase. There's not a lot of major drivers of the larger scale right now. And I don't know, it seems like every time I check those long range outlooks, they're changing. So yeah, I don't put a whole lot of stock in that right now, especially when you're looking ahead at virtually zero precip for the next 7 to 10 days. Doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence, unfortunately.
definitely.
I did have one more question. This is Kevin from Oldham County again. On the Mesonet sites, are there any sites actively being built at this point, or are the cameras being added to any more sites at this point?
Yes, we have a ribbon cutting in Russell County this coming Tuesday. Now that site's been online now for a couple of months, and we've just installed a new site. I'll just say in the Lexington area, and we'll have that announcement coming up soon. So probably in a week or two. But yeah, if you know of counties that currently don't have a site, but you'd like one there, let me know, and we'll work with you to identify a site host and get a site there. So we are looking actively in counties that don't currently have a station.
Okay, we do have one station here in Oldham County in the north side of the county. So I think we're in pretty good shape. Shelby County, I think, it's got, I believe, 2 sites currently. So we're in pretty good shape in this area, I think.
Right. I need to find one in Jefferson County, and I
Right.
know Bullet has one, and yeah, that area is pretty good, but there are a couple of counties still.
Right. Yes, sir. Thank you.
This is Ben Rudy down here in Fulton County. The soil temperature and moisture sensors have been down for several months at our state mesonet here. Is there any timeline on getting those back online?
Yeah, Ben, thanks for the question. Let me talk with our tech guys and see what we can do. I know we've had some issues with just getting new sensors from the vendor. But let me check with the tech guys and see what we can do, and see if we can't move that up in the priority list.
All right, I appreciate it.
And there's a note in the chat. There's a disturbance in the Gulf that has high chance for tropical development, but not forecast or move northward. Tropical cyclones have bailed Kentucky out of drought or drought onset in years past, but no such luck with this particular system. It doesn't appear. And that's absolutely right. Tropical systems are usually a blessing for Kentucky, and we could use one now.
Needed one last year too, and it didn't pan out then either. So
that's true. Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments? Questions? Yeah, it's nice to see at least the plain states getting some much needed rain. I know they've been in a long-term drought for quite a while, and it's still pretty hit and miss out there, and as it normally is, but it's nice to see at least somebody getting some relief, and hopefully we'll get some here soon. Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for your participation. And again, our next webinar will be July 6th, and we look forward to seeing you again then. So thanks very much. Yeah, bye everyone.
Take care, Jerry.